One of the largest and earliest civil rights protests in American history was the Montgomery Bus Boycott.
African Americans refused to ride city buses in Montgomery, Alabama, protesting racial segregation.
The Montgomery Bus Boycott happened from December 5, 1955, all the way until December 20th of 1956.
The United States Supreme Court made a law declaring that Montgomery's segregation laws on buses were unconstitutional.
The boycott is what really introduced the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. into the spotlight.
He became one of the most important leaders of the civil rights movement.
And prior to the boycott, segregation between white people and black people was very common in the South.
Public areas like schools, restrooms, water fountains, and restaurants had designated areas for black people and white people.
That's true, Cadence, as well as public transportation such as buses and trains also had separate areas where black people could sit and others were where white people could sit.
White people sat up front, but black people had to sit in the back.
And if the front of the bus was taken, a black person had to give up his or her seat for a white person.
This is what happened in Montgomery, Alabama.
The boycott began right after Rosa Parks, a black passenger, declined to give up her seat to a white passenger on December 1st in 1955. And we'll learn more about how this all happened in just a few minutes.
But multiple African American residents in Montgomery were involved politically before Parks was even arrested.
The Women's Political Council, or WPC, was actually founded in 1946, almost 10 years before the incident that happened with Rosa Parks.
The Women's Political Council was founded to fight the Jim Crow policies over Montgomery city buses.
As well, the NAACP, which stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was looking for ways to oppose and protest the unfair treatment of black Americans in the public transportation system.
On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks took the bus home after work in Montgomery, Alabama.
And Rosa Parks was already sitting down in the row nearest the front for black people.
As the bus began to fill up, the driver told people in Rosa's row to move back to make room for a white passenger.
And she refused to move and was then arrested and fined $10.
Hey, guess what? Did you know that Rosa Parks was not the first resident of Montgomery to refuse to give up her seat to a white passenger?
That's right, Gus. In fact, her name was Claudette Colvin, and she was a black teenager and was arrested in March of 1955 for refusing to give up her seat for the same exact reason.
However, local civil rights leaders chose Parks' arrest to dispute the local segregation laws.
And in response to Rosa Parks' arrest, the WPC started handing out leaflets telling all African Americans to boycott the buses in Montgomery.
The NAACP and WPC chose to announce the boycott on December 5th. This was only 4 days after Rosa Parks was arrested.
That's right, and to their surprise, the boycott gained publicity in the news.
Almost 90% of the black community responded to the boycott.
During the meeting on the evening of the boycott, they decided to continue the protest even longer.
They then elected Martin Luther King Jr. to be the leading representative of a new organization called the Montgomery Improvement Association, or the MIA.
And Martin Luther King was a Baptist minister and had the gift to attract large crowds and followers, but also share a message in a peaceful demonstration.
During the boycott, they tried to talk with city commissioners, also the bus companies, to talk about their requirements.
Some of these demands were a first-come, first-seated policy, as well as hiring black drivers for the buses.
The bus companies and Montgomery officials decided not to meet the protesters' demands.
So instead, black people discovered ways to travel by planning and working together.
And in order to get to work, they carpooled, walked, rode their bikes, and even used horse-drawn buggies.
Black taxi drivers even lowered their cab fares to only 10 cents. That was actually the same cost as what it cost to ride the bus.
However, some white people were troubled by the boycott.
And many of these protesters were attacked in the streets.
The African American taxi drivers who had lowered their fares were then fined by the city.
And Martin Luther King's home was bombed.
Many of the boycotters were threatened or fired from their jobs.
And there were even several times that police arrested some of the protesters and sent them to jail.
But the boycott lasted for more than a year, all the way until June 5th, 1956.
And this was when a Montgomery federal court passed a ruling that it was against the law to racially segregate any seating on the buses.
Doing that was considered a violation of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
And this amendment was added in 1868 after the Civil War.
The amendment declared that all citizens, no matter what their race, have equal rights and protection under federal and state laws.
And then finally, on December 20th, 1956, racial segregation was declared unconstitutional.
The following day, on December 21st, 1956, Montgomery buses were integrated.
And that happened 381 days after the boycott began.
Hey, guess what? Did you know that the actual bus where Rosa Parks sat can be visited still at the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan?
And though the Montgomery bus boycott ended more than 60 years ago, the effects of the movement are still felt and still honored today.
Well, hey, guess what? Now you, me, and everyone else knows all about the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe.
Bye!
Bye.